will be kind of joining along the way. So we're going to get started today. I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am here today with Craig St. Jean of Netlink, and we're going to do a presentation and a discussion around OutSystems and the Choose Your Own APPventure. It's kind of the twist on the old Choose Your Own adventure. Craig is going to be able to build this great demo for us. It is a telehealth application with a back end and a front end with mobile, and it is a really nice application. But during the way, we're going to stop and ask you, what would you like us to do next? We're going to throw a poll up on the screen, and then you can choose, and the winning selection will actually be the next thing that Craig will build for us. So this is going to be fun. I am an OutSystems solution architect. My name is Ed Aviza, and Craig, why don't you go ahead and do a brief intro of yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm Craig St. Jean. It's great to have you all here today. I am the Chief Technology Architect at Netlink Digital Solutions. We are an implementation, so delivery, sales, and global training partner of OutSystems. And I'm also an OutSystems MVP. And yeah, thank you again so much for joining. Ed?
All right, terrific. So we're going to cover a few things before the presentation, before the actual demo. First, we're going to talk about what is a modern application development platform, how do companies use it, and we'll give you, a little view into some of the companies that are using it. We have a lot of great logos that are using OutSystems to build applications. And then we'll get into the demonstration. And again, you'll be able to make choices along the way. So when you're watching the presentation, keep your eyes open for the poll. Craig will be looking for that as well for the next steps. We are recording this, so I want to make sure everyone's okay with that. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all again. And so what is OutSystems? Really, OutSystems is a modern way to build applications. It's a full stack, full lifecycle visual development technology that has the ability to do both business process and business modeling, interface development. As you can see from the screenshot, it's very visual in terms of drag and drop. It has the ability to allow you to manage and create your data models, as well as all the logic that will make your application function as you expect it to. So it's a full stack, full lifecycle, complete application development platform out of the box. So let's just take a step back before we go into more details. Why is OutSystems becoming very important in the application development space? These days, I don't know if people on the call have seen the Gartner or Forrester reports, but Gartner has rated us one of the leaders in low-code application development. And Gartner's also said that they expect that fully 70% of application development by 2024 or so will be done with low-code solutions. So why is this becoming an area of interest in the market right now? Let's take a look at that. First thing we run into is, of course, digitization challenges, right? It's difficult with traditional application development efforts and processes and development tools to really keep up with the demand that the organization is putting on the IT organization. So for example, we have a lot of backlogs. There's always demand for more applications, more automation, more tools to address business needs for companies. And complexity oftentimes, if not all the time, falls to the developers, right? Developers will have to address these backlogs. There's a lot of work involved with it. And building things using traditional code is time consuming. It can be very difficult to do things quickly. So it's very difficult to keep up with the growing backlogs. There are often hard divisions between business and IT. So there's challenges from the perspective of communication between these different divisions and different departments. And unique user experiences are tough to create, right? Customer experiences are tough to create. That's a challenge for developers. A lot of developers, for example, that I know who do traditional coding are great maybe at the back end stuff, and they do the integrations and they do the coding in the back end. But user interface is kind of a specialized thing that you need to have a sense of aesthetics and more experience with that. So finally, the talent shortages. As we all know, there's the great resignation underway because of the pandemic and all the changes that that's brought about. There's a lot of people that are looking to hire developers, and there's a shortage of talented developers out in the marketplace. So the next thing that's a challenge is it's hard to meet non-functional requirements. So even if your developers can keep up with demand from a perspective of building your applications, it's difficult to create applications quickly while maintaining quality. Security and governance are very challenging. These are difficult things for organizations to manage, right? And scalability and reliability add additional complexity, right? You want to make sure that your applications are scalable and that your end users don't end up with a scenario that leaves them struggling to take advantage of the application. And then finally, kind of along the same lines of the backlog, there's constant change in the marketplace these days. There's an explosion of SaaS solutions. Applications need to be modified, updated, and changed quickly. And new technologies appear faster than apps. So sometimes you'll be in the middle of a process of building an application, and the next thing you know, some SaaS product comes out that essentially renders your work useless. So there's a lot of challenges that companies are facing today in terms of digitizing their applications and their application development. So developers have so many things to do, and yet so little time to really keep up with everything. And developers oftentimes have this frantic kind of approach of like, whoa, I can't keep up with this. Do I really need to master all these skills? I just don't know what to do first, right? There's a lot of different things that developers have to juggle, and it can be very challenging. And on top of all of that, organizations frequently run into technical debt. So old, more traditional applications are often difficult to change. Even SaaS products, for example, if you're using an older CRM or an ERP system, it can be very difficult. The technical debt is estimated to cost businesses over $5 trillion over the next 10 years. So there's a lot of technical debt. And as you can see here, on average, companies spend 28% of their budget addressing technical debt. Now, that's not really the best use of those dollars in that time for investment. And I love the graphic here. We have somebody on a bike, too busy, can't stop, but they have square wheels. So they're not very productive. They're not very effective. And the person behind them is saying, I can help, but you can't focus because there's just too much to deal with. So time pressure and the constantly changing needs and outdated technology can be a very heavy weight on companies and organizations that are trying to move forward with digitizing and digital transformation of their businesses. So what do companies really need to be successful? Well, we need a future-proof solution. Instead of shortcuts that make things maybe easier in the short term, what we really need to do is to maintain low technical debt in order to create a healthy factory of application development and not waste time on and money and resources on refactoring your applications for the future. So this is where OutSystems comes in. OutSystems actually allows you to build applications quickly and in an automated fashion using modular components that is very analogous to what you see in this image. This image shows the Model T Ford factory back in the 1920s or so. A lot of manual processes. Everything's done by hand back then. Whereas on the right, you see a Tesla factory. 90% of the work is done in an automated way. It's much faster. It's much more consistent. It's much more scalable. And that's why a company like Tesla can constantly keep breaking records on delivering their automobiles to the market, right? So we're going from the sort of old-fashioned hand-built way of doing things to a more automated approach and a more modular approach that actually enables developers to not necessarily focus on language capabilities, learning specifics about Python, Java, C#, but rather focusing on building functional, useful, and attractive, beautiful applications for their end users. So again, slow manual processes on the left, you see, you're declaring your variables, everything is coded. You have to make sure your brackets and semicolons are in the right place. I've spent a number of years of my career doing traditional development. I've worked in Python, Java, C#, a number of languages. When I discovered OutSystems, I fell in love with it because the fact of the matter is you can build things in a visual way. You can do things in a much more automated way. It's highly modular, so there's a tremendous amount of reusability, and that makes your development life cycle much quicker and much shorter to bring value to your organization. And that's really the key metric, time to value. So again, full stack, full life cycle application that benefits both IT and the business, right? So for IT, you can build things 2 to 5 times faster to build applications and make changes to those applications. It's a full stack, again, full life cycle. It's got built-in code reviews and application monitoring. all the capabilities that you would expect from a modern application development platform. But for the end users, they have a modern, attractive, fast, secure, multi-channel application that can be delivered quickly, can be changed quickly. You can deliver mobile applications for iOS and Android. You can do PWAs for your progressive web apps, where then you can have a single code base for all your users, regardless of the platform they're on. It also takes advantage of reactive for that PWA capability. And then you have the ability to integrate with almost anything on the planet using APIs, microservices, and other capabilities. So this really addresses the needs for both the business and IT, and that brings everyone together in a more functional way. So full stack actually refers to the fact that we allow you to do everything within the platform. So in the first slide, I mentioned the fact that you can create your data models, for example. So here's an example of a data model. You can see that the relationships are there. The joins are available. We have one-to-one, one-to-many. Even our query tool which is called the aggregates, is a visual tool that allows you to build your joins and build group bys and use all your SQL in a visual way without having to write the actual code. Business processes can be automated as well. So you can have processes that require an approval. For example, you can have multiple pathways for those business processes as part of your application. Logic for your application is done in a visual way. So as you can see here, the drag and drop of those different icons of different components, it makes it very easy to create your applications. And then finally, at the user interface level, we support full theme-based development so that you can create custom screens, custom themes that will reflect your organization's colors and logos and things of that nature. And all that can be reused within all your applications, making it easy to create consistent and attractive applications for your customers, as well as your employees internally. And so again, we're allowing you and enabling, empowering you to build intuitive, attractive user interfaces and user experiences very quickly by using our drag and drop technology and our visual build technology. We also have full integration. So we have the ability to integrate and extend via APIs, whether REST, SOAP, or OpenAPI. On this particular side, it says there's 3,000 plus open source components. I think we're now at 5,000 plus. We have a repository within OutSystems called The Forge, which is an open source repository for all kinds of integrations and custom modules that you can reuse in your own applications. We also take advantage of cloud services. Our default deployment platform is on AWS, but if you wish to deploy on Azure or Google Cloud or even on-prem in your own data center, we also support that as well. And then we can integrate with enterprise systems. So for example, you can see here, you have SAP integrations, we have Salesforce, Google, Azure, a tremendous amount of integrated capabilities. And then finally, obviously, different types of databases can be connected. So we have pre-built integrations for the most common, but you can also create your own integrations very easily using a tool that we have called Integration Builder, which is a great tool for connecting your applications. And finally, as I mentioned, you can create mobile native applications, iOS or Android applications that can be deployed in the marketplace for either Android or Apple. Those Apple stores, you need to have a specific kind of configuration done. We help you build that very easily. Or again, you can take advantage of the progressive web app where you have a single code base that then becomes your single source of truth for your application on any platform that you want to deploy onto. And we support your entire development lifecycle, right? So again, full stack, full lifecycle. We have integrated DevOps tools that make it easy for you to deploy. It makes it easy for you to move your code from the development to the test, to maybe a staging, to a production environment, that type of thing. There's conflict management and conflict resolution built in, so multiple developers can work together. And they can, when they publish their code, they can manage conflicts very easily. And you can deploy depending on your role in the organization. So we support role-based access control, or RBAC, fully. So only the people who can or need to deploy or need to be able to build the applications have access to it. However, if you prefer to use other tools for your DevOps, such as maybe Azure DevOps, Jenkins, any of those types of tools, we fully support integration with those as well. So if you prefer to use something like that, or that's something you've already committed to in your environment, you can also take advantage of those as well. And then finally, in terms of technical debt, this is an image, or actually a GIF animated image of our architecture dashboard. And the architecture dashboard is really a heat map showing where you have technical debt in your organization. You can drill down on individual applications to learn about what specific technical debt exists here. And as you can see here, you can generate a report that, for example, mentions inline JavaScript or public entities that are read-only. The architecture dashboard is kind of your best friend in terms of helping you deploy very solid applications that are tested and that are, reusable and prevent additional technical debt in your environment. All right, so ultimately, OutSystems really gives every organization the power to innovate. And our kind of tagline these days is that what we really do is help your organization and your developers build applications fast, build them right so that they follow standards and that they're reusable and modular, and then build them for the future so that you avoid technical debt and can actually rely on your applications going forward, which can then easily be updated and changed. So the power of innovation is accelerated by taking advantage of the OutSystems platform. Now, here's a list of some of our customers. I mentioned at the very beginning that we had some great names here. Toyota is a terrific case study. If you're interested in learning, some of these case studies are available on our website at outsystems.com. We have Jones Lang LaSalle, big real estate company, Zurich Re. We have Coca-Cola, a tremendous number of logos that have invested in OutSystems and are getting tremendous amount of value from the OutSystems platform. So ultimately, what OutSystems does for these companies is that we give them the ability to really solve a broad set of challenges. So customer experience transformation, for example, again, being able to increase revenue, market share, customer satisfaction, net promoter scores to really improve the customer experience when they take advantage of your applications. We empower you to create workplace innovation. A lot of internal systems are slow, uncomfortable to use for employees or even the people that manage those systems. We can build employee satisfaction surveys, safety and retention, and productivity applications. There's a tremendous amount of innovation that you can build to empower your workplace to be more efficient. I also mentioned throughout the presentation that you can create process automation. So you can reduce costs and increase efficiencies by utilizing an automated process management tool that will actually stop and wait if there's a need for a manual approval, right? So you have full capabilities of building processes within your applications. And then finally, to really modernize your application, right? To help you lower your infrastructure costs by taking advantage of a well-managed platform, to reduce your licensing costs for COTS products, any common off-the-shelf applications, or your large-scale enterprise systems. One of my favorite case studies is a company called Vopak, that's V-O-P-A-K. They're a European company that has been around for 400 years, and they had an ERP that they weren't getting a lot of value out of. They were struggling to update and modify. They decided to build their own in-house ERP on OutSystems, and they've been very happy with it. So again, take a look at some of the case studies that we have on our website. In terms of some of the applications that we can address, order management is an application that we created for demonstrating to our customers. This is something via digital and integrated systems. This was built by one developer in 4 weeks. You got process automation, inventory tracking, sales tracking, and workflows. And you can see that there's a lot of very attractive screens here. And then also built-in integration with SAP and Salesforce with both web and mobile front ends. And finally, we have field services. That's another application use case that we've built to demonstrate. This one includes offline capabilities. So a field services representative can take advantage of using their laptop or, I'm sorry, their iPad or their Android device or their phone in the field, even if there is no connectivity, and then the data will be synced up after the fact once they have an internet connection. And this particular application was built by one developer in 8 weeks. So again, time to market, time to value is very quick with the OutSystems platform. A couple of the customers that I mentioned, Think Money is a digital banking company. They went live in three and a half months for this application. They had several key integrations, native mobile features, and it was up to 6 times faster for them to build the application and make changes to it than they would have experienced with traditional software development. And then Schneider Electric as well. Schneider actually built a number of applications, and they took about 10 weeks per app to develop these. So again, legacy migration of old systems, modernizing everything with mobile and web-based interfaces. All right, so that is my pitch and my presentation for everyone here. Now it's time to turn it over to Craig to choose your own APPventure. Craig, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Ed. Again, I just want to thank everyone for joining here today while I get my screen shared. Here we are. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about the goal of what I want to build for you today. And this is going to be a medical televisit app. What you can see here is on the OutSystems Forge. I like to call this GitHub for OutSystems. It's an open source community of OutSystems applications, modules, connectors, etc. And I've published the APPventure medical televisit app that I'll be working through today on the Forge, so you can always take a look at this at some later time. But to give you a little bit of an idea, this application is going to have scheduling for doctors, as well as the ability to start a video session with your patient. And this is kind of the back office for what we're going to be working with today. And what I'll be building for you is the mobile counterpart for a patient, where they will be able to log in, view their appointments, start a video session with their doctor, and so on. And this is also in the Forge if you wanted to take a look at it. So just to, again, to give you a little bit of background as to what we're going to be working with today. So let me switch over to my development environment and we can go ahead and get started. This is Service Studio. It is the OutSystems development environment. And what I'm going to do today is create a mobile app from scratch. It's going to leverage some existing APIs and libraries that I've already built for code reuse. And from there, we're going to give some options to choose where you want to go. To give you a little bit of a preview, some of the options that you'll be able to choose from after I build the core part of the app will be things like Touch ID or Face ID authentication, calendar integration if you want to add an appointment to your device's calendar, using the camera, multi-language support, maps, notifications, and a couple of other options. So after I build the core section of the app, we're going to throw a poll up on the screen and you can choose where you want to go. And that's how we are going to manage choosing your own adventure. And we'll just keep implementing more of them until we run out of time. So, so to get started, we're going to create an app. We're going to say from scratch. And we're going to say that this is a phone app. Again, because this is a mobile app. Now, if you're not familiar with how mobile apps and OutSystems work, you can deploy them as native iOS and native Android applications that can be deployed to the App Store and Play Store, respectively. And you can also make them deployable as a progressive web app that you can access from your mobile device's web browser or even through your computer's web browser. So you're not really limited in any fashion there. And when it comes to the native apps, you can leverage Cordova plugins to access your device's native capabilities. So when you think of a native app, you think of something that can access, your GPS or your camera, or interact with your phone's wallet, or so on. And these are all things that you can use with a mobile app in OutSystems because they can be built as a fully native app. So that being said, we're going to create a new app. We're going to call it APPventure medical televisit.
Here.
I'm sorry?
We're not
Craig,
seeing, yeah, we're only seeing your development tab. We're not seeing the other tabs. If you're
Oh.
going to create an application, I'm not sure if you need to share your whole desktop.
That's all right. I have backup options. For some reason, sharing my screen.
No, actually, your
with,
screen was stuck, in the studio.
Yeah, sometimes when I share my screen in the beta version of Studio, I notice that it doesn't always share the pop-ups, but that's okay. I'm pulling up the standard version, and we can proceed that way.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me know, because I would have kept going.
Yeah, now we can see.
Right.
Perfect.
Looks good. Looks good. Thank you.
So before I was in the Mac version of the beta version of Service Studio. Now I've just switched over to my Windows VM. So continuing on, we're going to create a new mobile app called APPventure Medical Televisit Mobile. And I'm just going to say create app. And an application in OutSystems is really just a collection of modules. And so the modules are where the real functionality is. So here I've got this app, and it's going to create a module called APPventure Medical Televisit Mobile. And I can set a module type. So because this is a phone application, I can create a phone app module, but I can also create a blank module if I want to build in some reusable code, or a service for microservices, or a library, or an extension. And an extension is what's going to give us the ability to add in any custom database integrations or .NET code. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and probably build this at a little bit of a quicker pace. So if you are brand new to OutSystems, I recommend check out the training material on OutSystems website. It's all free. There's tons of videos, guided paths, things that'll help you really have an understanding of why I'm doing things. But other than that, I'll do my best to explain as I'm going. So now we have this blank mobile application, and we have our one-click publish button here, which is what's going to push us to push this application to our live development environment. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that up front, so that way we have this module on the server. And while it's doing that, I'm actually going to start developing this application. So we're going to start by having a screen for listing our scheduled appointments for whoever our current user is. We're going to have a screen for our current session with our doctor. And then I'm also going to have a patient listing screen for an admin user, so that way they can log in as a patient, or in this case, so that I can actually test as different people and show you what we're trying to accomplish. So here, I'm just going to create a new blank screen, but as you see, there's a whole bunch of templates. We're going to leverage some of them throughout this demo as well. And we're going to say, this is just our home screen, and I want to include it in the menu of our application. And I'll go ahead and create these other screens as well. I'm going to create a patient listing, And, if we go through these, I think the employees directory seems appropriate for a patient's listing. So we'll create that screen. And the nice thing is with these templates, it's not going to do anything that I couldn't do myself. It's just going to accelerate my time to building the screen. So we'll give it a moment to pull in the template. And there we go. And we'll create one more screen. This is going to be the screen for our current session with our doctor. So this is where we're going to have a video chat available that's going to show us and my doctor. So when we look at this mobile app, you can see this preview here. And the first thing I want to do is just check on some of the navigation, make sure that we can get to the different screens, and then we're going to implement the different screens. So here we have menu, which is showing our home, our patients, and our current session. And we also have this thing that's called a bottom bar. So if I look at our patient screen, when we're working on a mobile app, we've got our menu icon, and then we have kind of our main content. And then if we scroll down, we want the bottom of the application to show this fixed navigation that's going to make it really easy for us to switch to different sections. So we don't always have to go into the menu to look at different sections. And that's what's called a bottom bar. So I'm going to go into that. So this is just basically like a reusable block that multiple screens can share. And I'm going to take in this bottom bar item. And actually, I'm going to have 3 of them to navigate to the 3 different sections that I mentioned. And for each of these, we're going to have a calendar option. We're going to have one for our current session. And we're going to have one for a patient's listing. And we're going to make this look a bit nicer by adding in some icons as well. So I'm going to drag that into this icon section. And OutSystems comes with a whole bunch of these icons already built in. So I don't have to add anything to get these. And one more. So now if I look at my home screen, I can see what this will look like, where it shows these navigation items down there. And we also want them to actually navigate. So I'm going to take a look at the widget tree, which is going to show exactly how all of these, or how everything that I'm looking at on the screen is built out. And I'm going to say, I want my calendar to link to my home screen. I want my current session to link to my current session screen. And I want my patients to link to there. Now, we only want to show the patients if I'm actually an administrator. So this is where we can get into some of the code reuse aspects of OutSystems. So when I click on this plug here, it's going to show me all the different modules that are in my environment and allow me to take in some dependencies. So I can pull in things like OutSystems Maps or Google Maps or an Azure connector or AWS connector, or in this case, I have built out a core service that already has a whole bunch of pre-built functionality that we're going to need to make this work. So this is basically the backend that our back office application is also leveraging. That's going to offer things like accessing our patients, accessing our schedules. It's also going to do security checks, so that way if a patient tries to access someone else, it's not going to allow them to, and so on. And this is all also in the Forge as well. So at the moment, I'm just going to say I want all of these dependencies, and we can remove the ones that we don't actually need later on. And so where I'm going with this is this patients button, we only want to show if I'm an administrator. And we also want to set access to that screen if I'm an administrator. So to accomplish that, I've got this bottom bar, and I'm going to use a built-in capability of OutSystems for role management. So you can see here, we have these different roles that are part of the core service that I built: administrator, doctor, nurse, patient, and scheduler. And so I'm going to add in a query to that those roles, and we're just going to say is add is what we're going to return out of this query. And you can see OutSystems automatically selected a data type of Boolean. Again, this is what it's trying to do to speed things up. I said is, so it said that's probably a Boolean, and we could change that if we wanted. So here I can say check administrator role, and I can just drag that in. And then I can either bring in an assign block, or I can use this AI assisted development where I can say set is admin to the result of check administrator role.has role. So again, continuing with the thought process that OutSystems is really just trying to speed us up any way it can. So now that we have the ability to determine in this bottom bar if we are actually an admin, I can enclose this link to patients in an if statement. And we're going to say we only want to show this if getPermissions.isAdmin is true. So I'm going to click that drop down. And now that will only show up in that scenario. But I also want to make sure that the user can't actually access that listing screen through modifying the contents of their browser, or if someone goes to modify the app or so on. So we have these roles within each screen, and I'm going to say this one is only available to an administrator. Whereas the home screen, we want that to be for an administrator, a doctor, a nurse, a patient, or a scheduler. And the current session, because this app is targeted towards just patients, we are going to make this be for just patients. So continuing on, we're going to take that same get permissions logic and also add that to our menu. So I just copied that action. And we're going to go to our menu. So this is the sidebar menu. And I'm going to move this down here so that way it's consistent with our bottom bar. And enclose this one in an if as well. And say get permissions is admin. And now we should have the navigation set up for what we want to build. Now there's one piece of reusable logic that I want to add in here. So we have client actions and server actions. Client actions are going to execute within the browser or the mobile device, and a server action, it's going to call back to the server. And as I'm listing my doctors, I want to be able to say, we have Dr. Smith, or we have registered nurse Jones, or we have etc. So just something for kind of improving the display of our application. And so I'm going to create this action here. We're going to call it get medical staff type prefix. And in our core services, we have this medical staff type enumeration, which is called a static entity, where we have these different types. And so in the logic of this, I can say, I want to take an input of a medical staff type ID, so the identifier to that enumeration. So it already set its data type accordingly. And then I'm going to add an output for a prefix, which will be text. We're going to say that this is can be called as a function as well. A function can be just called within an expression, so not just something that you're dragging into your action flow. And I'll show that when we get to it. But just to kind of get your feet wet with what some of the basic logic in OutSystems looks like, I'm going to have a switch statement. And we have 3 different scenarios. So we have doctor, registered nurse, and nurse practitioner. And we're going to have these 3 different conditions. So here, I'm going to set the prefix to doctor in the condition that I just double clicked on it there, that my medical staff type ID is entities dot medical staff type dot doctor. And we're going to rename this as well, so that way we can see it visually in a much easier way. So we'll then do this again for nurse, where we will set the prefix to RN. And another one for nurse practitioner, which has an abbreviation of NP. And now that we've assigned these values to prefix, we can just end this flow. And so this is what logic looks like in OutSystems. So now let's actually make this useful, and let's start taking a look at the home screen and make this actually start listing out our current patients' schedules. So let's add a title of APPventure. And in this home screen, we're going to add a call to get our current schedules. So, we'll call it get schedule. And here I'm going to use from my core service a server action called get current user full schedule. So I'm just going to drag that in here. And that module is going to manage all the security and make sure that we're only adding things for this current user. And I'm going to copy its output of schedules as an output of this action. And again, I'm just going to say set schedules to the response of that. And now we can build this out into the screen. So this is where things really start to kind of speed up. So here I can just drag in a list, and I can say, I want this list to go through my schedules. And let's put in a container, which is kind of like a div. And inside of that container, I want my current schedules start date. And here we can do some formatting as well. So we don't want to show this as, in an ISO date time format. So what I can do is format date time. Paste that back in. And maybe we want to say, it's the 9th of March. And we can also hover over these to see the full documentation, or control click on them and see exactly what this is expecting as well. So we have that start date. And let's make this a heading 4. So this is just applying a CSS style. And then I'm going to add a list item. And this list item is where we can actually add the details of this schedule and add any swipe actions if we want. So in the future, if you choose to look at the calendar plugin, we'll add a swipe action to actually add that in to pull in the calendar. So you can see here, we're just going to delete this existing write action because we don't want any swiping at the moment. Actually, yeah. So here we're going to set this list action to, if they click on it, we want this to redirect the user to the current session. And now we want to add, so in order to redirect the user for the current session that I'm linking here, we're going to add an input parameter to the current session screen called schedule ID. So now you can see we have some errors. So we're saying we have to pass the schedule ID. So it's not showing what I want in the suggestions where I want to pass the current item's ID. So I'm going to go to expression editor, get schedules, current schedule ID. And then we have two other errors. Now this is because our bottom bar and our menu are also required to pass in the schedule ID. So the way that I'm going to manage this is I'm going to keep just kind of a global variable of what my current session ID is. So that way, if the user navigates away from the session screen, they can go back into it and resume where they left off. So we're going to call this current schedule ID. And this is going to be a schedule identifier. And then in our links, where we have these errors, we can pass our client.current schedule ID. And I also want to make it so that way, if you haven't actually selected a session yet, that you can't go to it. So I want this to be enabled only in the scenario that our client, our current session ID or schedule ID, I apologize, is not null. And we're going to just reproduce that for the menu as well. So our menu is going to navigate to the current schedule ID. And this is only going to be enabled if that is not null. And we'll work on assigning the value of that in a moment here. So back to our home screen. Now we've got this list, which is just showing start times. And in here, we want to actually show what the appointment is, the start time and end time, who it's with. So I'm going to bring in an expression. And here I'm going to show uh-oh. My notes are not working for me. I wanted to copy and paste in the expression. 1 second. I don't know why my computer has suddenly decided it doesn't want to work right. It's okay. Oh, I see. I have multiple keyboard layouts installed on my computer, and it switched layout. So as I was trying to navigate through my notes, it wasn't the wrong. It was showing the wrong keys. Anyways, so this expression that I want to show here is going to be this medical staff type prefix. So this is the action I showed before, where it's going to say doctor or RN or so on, and then my current schedule's medical staff last name. So we can say this might look like, a Dr. Smith. And we also want to show, maybe we'll make this bold too. So let's go into styles, and we're just going to bold that one. And then we can have another expression. And here we want to show the start and end time. So again, I've already written this out, so I'm going to paste it in. But you can see what we're doing is a format of the current schedule's start date time in hours and minutes. And then we're showing a hyphen and the end time. And lastly, we probably want to show the reason for this appointment. So one more expression. And this is going to be our get schedule's current purpose. Now, I don't want this to display all on the same line here. So I'm just going to wrap all of these in their own container, which again is just like a div. And so now it will look like this. And I can also preview this in other format. So, we can see this is what this screen is going to look like on a tablet, or this is what it's going to look like if I rotate my device, or this is what it's going to look like if I'm in my mobile browser. So that being said, now we probably want a button to join this session as well. I have the on click of the list item currently set to go into the session, but I want to add a button as well that only shows when it's actually time to join. So I'll have the tap on the list item for testing purposes. But what I want to do here is I want to have a columns with a medium right. And what this is going to do is have my left side be this text that I want. And on the right side, I want to have a button that's going to actually join the session. So we can call this join. And I want this to be aligned to the right. So I enclose it in a container, and then I'm going to click the right justify. And if I click on this button, I want it to go to the current session. And again, I want it to pass the schedules, the current schedules ID. I'm just going to click on this and change it here. So this is same as if I were to just change it in this expression editor. But I only want this to be visible if we're about to, if our appointment's about to start. So here I've got some logic that I've already written out. So if it's about to start, or if it's already in progress, or if it's just ending, maybe we're running over a couple minutes, then I want this button to be visible. So we can go ahead and add that. And now we can go to the patient screen. That's another screen that needs implemented because this screen is done at this point. We can see there's a suggestion that this list should only have a single direct child. So we can make any modifications that we want at that point. That's because I have these two different items here. Actually, I can remediate that by enclosing those in a container, just like that suggestion was offering me. But continuing on, we have this patient screen. So this one was created from a template. And so if we look at what it is today, it's an employee directory using sample data. And we've got a search, we've got a listing, and then we've got a detail. So this is what it shows if the user actually taps on that. And then we have some additional items down here for additional things. These are different tabs that are in this sample. So what I want this to say is, patients. I'm not going to need these tabs because I'm just doing a patient listing. I'm not doing multiple things. So I'm going to just delete that. I'd like to keep the search. I don't need these teams and offices. So I really just want this employees, which is going to be, again, changed into patients. But since we're no longer in that where we have multiple tabs, I'm going to just remove that if condition. And now if we look over here, we no longer need some of these variables and actions that were part of the sample data. So I'm just deleting the ones that are no longer used. And what I want to do is I want to change this get employees right here to actually be a get patients. So I'm going to fetch data where I want to call get patients. And so I can go into here, we can say get patients. And here we have some pagination. So this is more for the website where we're going to let us see all the different patients, but for this mobile app, because this screen is really just for an administrator for testing purposes, we're just going to show the first 20, but we're going to offer up that search. So we're going to use the search keyword there. And we're going to set the sort. This is something that's shown in the documentation of this core service. So, but this is basically showing with the syntax for using SQL statements, where I can say party dot first name. So it's essentially an entity name and a column name, but don't worry about that too much for now. And I'm going to copy this patient structure from get patients as an output. Delete the old one. And the only reason I'm doing this is just so I don't have to go through the list selector and go and find my patient doctor structure. It's just, again, a faster way of doing that. So we're going to set the output there. And then we can get rid of our get employees, go back to the screen, and we're going to start modifying this. So what I want for each of these is I don't really want this image. So I'm just going to delete that. And we're going to change the list to, instead of going over get employees, we want to go over get patients. And we're going to show here the patient's first name and last name. So we'll show get patients current patient first name and patient last name. And we'll just say this is John Doe. And we're going to then show their primary doctor as well. I think that makes sense. So it is just sort of another item in this list. We're going to show, again, our get patients. And we're going to say, we're going to use that one function again. So where we're going to go against the medical staff type. And then show the medical staff last name. And that function, we can use it by hitting Control Space, which for some reason in my virtual machine isn't working at the second. Or we can look at these user functions here. So we can see this and double click that to pull that in. And I'm just going to change this example for display purposes. So it shows that. Now we still have this error here. So right now it's saying it's going to show this as selected because this is a master detail widget if we are on the current employee. So what we really want to do is change this interface. And we want to say, instead of selected employee, we're going to say selected patient. And this is going to be a patient identifier. And we want to compare the selected patient variable to get patients current ID. And then also we want to modify this select employee to be a select patient. We're going to change the employee ID here to patient ID. So this is what's going to be called when the user actually taps on that item. So let's fix the error here because the patient ID is not going against get employees. It's going against get patients, current ID. And next we have this master detail section where we have get employee detail. So I'm going to get rid of those. We can get rid of this not implemented as well. We're going to have a get patient by ID. So that means when the user actually selects one of the patients, we want it to give the patient detail. And so we have get patient by ID. I'm going to drag that in here. And again, set the output of this action. And here we're going to say, we're going to set patient. And here it didn't want to set this automatically. If I were to look at the structure there, I probably had a slight mismatch, but it still puts everything in here. So we're going to say we want to set all of these values. So that way, if we want to modify the mapping, we can. And there. And the patient that we want to go against is the selected patient variable. And we're just going to make a couple quick changes in here so that way we can get onto the video section. So we want this this detail to show name of our get patient by ID, first name and last name. So this is going to show just their initials in that red circle there. And I'm going to reuse that for this expression here. And we'll change this expression again also to show their primary staff member, primary doctor. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete the rest of this. And we'll say select a patient to view the details. And then one last thing, I want to change this edit profile. Is we want to change this to be a login button. And there's an if condition because it's going to display it differently if we're on a phone versus a tablet. So this is what's going to allow my administrator to impersonate someone. And we're going to say this is going to go to on click of a new screen action. And I want to change the on click of the tablet version of that as well to also go to login. And then we can implement our login. So again, our core service has a login as patient. We're going to say selected patient. And once we've done that, we can just redirect the user to their home screen. So that way we can see their schedule. So we've got a couple of errors here. Search doesn't need to refresh all these things that we got rid of. We really want search just to refresh this get patient's data source so it can use our search. And similarly, if someone selects a patient, then we want the get patient by ID to be refreshed. We also don't want get patient by ID to be called until someone's actually selected someone. So I'm going to change that from at start to on demand. And the image here is we don't want to actually display an image of the user. So we're going to just remove that because they're not going to have an image. And we're going to get rid of this add link in the header. And now we can publish. And now we can actually move on to the really exciting part of this, where we are going to use Vonage video for showing the patient and the doctor. And then hopefully I'm running a little bit behind. So hopefully we'll actually get time to allow you to choose where to go from there. So we're going to quickly move on to this current session. And here I'm going to pull in the Vonage Forge component dependencies. So we have Vonage Video Mobile. And I'm just going to take everything for now as well. So a few things we want to do when the user navigates to the screen. If you recall earlier, we had that current schedule ID. So I want to set that value when we initialize the screen. So that way, if the user leaves the screen and comes back, then they can resume their schedule. And we want to change that schedule ID to be a schedule identifier, not text. And then on the screen, there's a few things that we want. So first, we're going to have, if we're actually in a session, so we're going to say is active, meaning is this current video session active? Then we want to show the doctor and the patient. So we're going to have an is active. Here we're going to show a, have a container where we're going to show the subscriber, which is, the publisher, which is going to be the doctor, and a subscriber, which is the patient. So that way it's going to show our video in these sections. And we're going to do just something in here for the purpose of making this actually appear right within Service Studio, since our video is not going to be initialized. So here we're going to say, we're going to say if true, we're going to say if false. So while this is actually showing on the screen, it's never going to go to the true branch. But for the purpose of showing it within Service Studio, I'm just going to show an image here, just kind of as a placeholder. And we're going to say this is just a user image. And I'm going to replicate that in here. And we also want a start session. So if the user is not in a session, they should be allowed to start one. And go here. We're going to center align that in the screen. So put it in a container and center align it. And if they click that, then we want to actually start our current session. So here we're going to say get Vonage session ID. And we're going to need a couple of other elements as well. And this is going to be only when the user clicks start session, we want to do this. And so here we are going to use a get schedule Vonage session ID. Then we're also going to need some API keys from Vonage. And we're going to pass in our schedule ID. And we're going to add these output variables from this, from these actions into our data source. So here we're going to say we want to set our session ID, our key, and our secret to session ID, key, and secret. And then one last thing is once this data source has been called, we want to actually join the session in Vonage. So here we're going to use join session. We're going to provide our API key, our API secret, our session ID, the div that our publisher is in, the div that our subscriber is in, and we're going to set a username to be client username. And then we're going to set is active to true, meaning we're now in here. And that's really it. That's going to provide everything that we need to allow an administrator to open up this app, see the patients, and then join a video session. So I can show you what this will look like. Let me stop sharing this screen and start sharing. Where did Chrome go? So on the website, I'm going to sign in, and I'm going to go to this individual's. These are all just random names. So Lozak, we're going to join his session or her. And now we have a video here. And so I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to start sharing from my phone where I've got a pre-built version of this app already. Share my screen. I'm going to log in. I'm going to select patients. We're going to do a search for here we are. And showing our primary care provider as well. I'm going to tap there and we're going to log in. And now we can see the schedule. So on my web browser, I'm currently in the March 9th at 10:05 general checkup. So I'm going to tap on that and I'm going to join the session. And now you can see we have two different cameras, one from my computer, which is the doctor that's showing up, which is kind of the one in the center, and then a preview of what I look like in the bottom right. And this is the app. We now have a medical televisit app that we can start modifying to add additional functionality and take this even further. So I think, Ed, do we have time for one poll? I think
we could probably, yeah, I think we can probably throw that up. Let me just put the poll on the screen and launch this poll.
So,
please go ahead, Craig.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, so here you can choose where you'd like to go next. Luckily, the majority of these are quite fast to demonstrate. I will say that the unit tests and biometric those ones are a little bit longer, but they are already implemented in the version that's in the Forge. If you want to see what those would look like.
All right, Craig, we are about 20% of our participants answering the question. So if everyone wants to go ahead and just express your opinion on where Craig should go next with this demo, go ahead and enter your request on the poll, and we're going to pick the one that's got the most popular request here. Also, while we're doing the poll, I want to mention that we are going to randomly select someone in the audience today to give you a pass for an OutSystems exam, a certification exam. So just to let you guys know that we're going to kind of do a random drawing afterwards, and keep your eyes out on your email. We'll also be asking for some feedback via email afterwards as well. We have 50% participation so far. Let's give this another, maybe 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, and to reiterate, I'm trying to look through the chat now that I'm actually pausing for a moment. I know, yes, the video will be available later. As far as sharing the application, these are all on the Forge if you search for APPventure. And that includes the fully pre-built mobile app where all of these things have been implemented, except for the unit tests, because that's in a different module. So I think biometric authentication is one.
Yeah,
So
looks like biometrics is currently ahead. So I guess we can go ahead with that. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you jumping on the poll here.
All right. Let's. Oops. Let me switch back to sharing my screen. And biometrics is pretty fun because, well, I think it's fun because it just uses the device's built-in fingerprint or Face ID capabilities. So what we're going to do to support that is we're going to use something called the Touch ID plugin. This is also in the Forge. Oh, and I will also add that in that pre-built mobile app on the Forge, it also has the steps that I've taken more or less to build this app, and also how to do it for all of the additional options that were in the poll. Again, with the exception of the automated unit tests and BDD framework, that one I'm still writing the documentation for, but it will be on there. Anyways, I'm going to pull in these dependencies from the Touch ID plugin. And what I want to do is I want to have some local storage that identifies, hey, has the user enrolled? Do they want to stay to be remembered? And if so, what was their user ID and some other things. So I'm going to create something called app configuration. And local storage is basically database storage, but on the local device. So it'll be kept on the phone. So I'm going to have a key, and I'm going to have a bool value and an int value. These are going to be used for some of the properties that I'll be saving. Now, I could also use the key store plugin, which would be a more appropriate place for these if it's holding a user ID or something like that. But for the purpose of showing this in time, we're going to go this route. I will also mention that when it comes to the authentication, since I'm just going to be storing a user ID, that by itself is not enough to make it secure. You would generally want to use something like OpenID Connect or OAuth, where you can then refresh the user's authentication through like a refresh token API, or you could use something like a hashed message that is signed by the server to authenticate that message. But for now, we're just going to show storing a user ID itself. So if we go into our login screen, here we want to make a few changes. So we're going to add an onReady, and here we're going to check, has the user already, or first I should say, is Touch ID even available, or Face ID or so on. It's one plugin for all of them. It'll just use whatever the device has. So we're going to say, if that plugin is available, I'm going to swap these connectors, because if it's not available, then we don't really need to do anything. Then we want to check what the biometric type is. So is it fingerprint, is it face, and so on. And I'm also going to store this type on the screen, so that way I can show in a visual either a fingerprint or a face, so they know what to tap on. So we're going to call this biometric type ID, which is going to use the biometric type identifier from Touch ID. And to start off with, we're just going to assign the current value of that to be none. We're not going to assign it until we actually know that the user is enrolled. So we're going to say that it's none. And then we're going to query our app configuration, and we're going to see if they're in fact enrolled. So here we're going to say that app configuration is going to store a key of biometric, which will just be a true or false, meaning are they enrolled or not? And if they are enrolled, then I'm going to set the remember me variable to the value, the Boolean value, so that way it's going to check that mark on the box that or on the screen that they are in fact enrolled. And if so, then we also want to store that biometric type on the screen or in that variable, so that way we can display on the screen the correct icon. So if we're doing remember me, we're going to set the biometric type ID to the response of check biometric. I realize I'm going fast, but again, this is all on the Forge as well. So now we've got a login button, but we also want a button to show the option to use that biometric login. And we're also going to have this pop up when they first go to the screen if they're already enrolled. So I'm going to put a button down here, put it in a container. I'm going to copy the CSS classes from the previous one. And this one is only going to be visible. I'm using timing. I say that and my properties window disappears. This one's only going to be visible if the biometric type ID is not none. And here we're going to say, let's drag this out. We can have a similar login where let's put this in here so that way we get a rotating login. But instead of saying login, we're going to have an icon, and it's really just going to be either a fingerprint or so on. So first, I'm going to add some images. We're going to import these images from here. So we're going to have a Face ID image and a Touch ID image. And we're then going to add these images into this button. And we're going to say this is Face ID. And we're going to make it much, much smaller. We're going to set it to 32 pixels. And we're going to bring in another one. Also 32 pixels. This is going to be our Touch ID. And this is only going to be visible if we have the appropriate type. So here we're going to say if the biometric type is fingerprint, then we're going to show, I got these in the wrong order. We're going to show the fingerprint, otherwise we're going to show the face. And when the user clicks on this, or also just when the screen pops up, we're going to have this action that's going to actually use Touch ID. So we're going to say Touch ID, invoke that. We have to provide a message. So I'm not going to customize that at the moment. And we're going to say, if that was successful, then we want to locate, we want to identify what the stored user ID was and log them in. So we're going to go into here. And we're going to find an app configuration with a key of user ID. And then we're going to call a do biometric login, which doesn't exist today, but we have in here, we're going to copy this. We're going to say do biometric login, and it's just going to take a user ID. Again, this really should be using something like OpenID Connect or something like that, because if you just provide a user identifier to this action, then anyone can modify the code in their browser and log in as an individual, and that's not very secure. But it'll show at least the right pattern for using Touch ID. As far as how you do the authentication, that'll depend on what your needs are. But we're going to use a login action, which I already have. And the login action in OutSystems allows us to just log in with a, apologize, I scrolled up on me there, with a user ID. So we're going to do that. And we're then going to call that from our biometric on click. Pass in the ID of the user from our app configuration. And then we want to execute the same thing that our login screen is executing with this feedback close and everything else. So we're going to refactor our login screen to take these away. And this is going to be kind of like a post login. So we're going to add a client action, post login. Because we want our regular login and our biometric login to do this. And flow. And here we're going to do the same thing. And if it wasn't successful, then we're just going to not do anything. And then the very last thing that we have to do to make this actually work is we have to store that biometric login. So in here, before we do these, we're first going to query for that app ID, or sorry, the user ID, as well as the biometric property. And I know we have 2 minutes left, but this is, we're almost there. So this is going to be the get biometric configuration, where we're querying for that property. And then we also have the user ID. Again, this is just what we're storing in local storage. Get user configuration. And give myself some more room. So we're going to say, if the user selected to remember me, then we want to assign our user ID in user configuration to our get user ID. And we want to update that value. So we're going to say creator update. The get user configuration current item. We're going to do the same thing to store that the biometric value was true, meaning they've selected to remember me. Biometric of true. I'm going to create that one. And then we can go back to continuing the process. And if they chose not to remember, then we're just going to delete the previous configuration. So that way, maybe they didn't want to do it anymore. And I'll publish that, and I'll really quickly show that on my phone. I apologize, I know we're running over here. But let me share my screen really quick. Yes, I know I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to log out. And we're going to tap our remember me. Enter in my credentials. Say login. Now, if I throw the app away and go back in, it automatically did Face ID there and brought us in. Or if I throw it away and don't face it towards myself, so that way Face ID fails, I can now tap the button to reinitiate that and then log in. So that's today's demonstration on choosing your own adventure. I want to thank everyone so much for joining. I apologize for going over a minute. Again, everything is available both through the recording and also in the Forge. You can look for, just do a search for AppVenture. Ed, back to you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that, Craig. That was fantastic. Really, really enjoy seeing this. I'm just going to share a couple of quick slides. So I want to remind everyone that what we saw here was the process of going from sort of the old-fashioned manual way As you can see on this image, right, we've got the kind of hand-built thing. But you know, with OutSystems, you now can automate. So you can go from a slow manual process to an automated process, but not like this. We're not talking about a robot taking over a developer's job. We're not talking about the machine taking control, but it's more like you get to don the superhero Iron Man suit. As a developer now, you can build applications fast. You can build them right. You can build them for the future using this platform. So this is a great image to show how this platform really empowers you as a developer to be more successful and productive and to build things more quickly for yourself and your organization. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have a little survey that we will be sending you. We'll also be sending out a free certificate for a training exam for one person chosen at random. And what's next? Next thing to do, we'd suggest go to outsystems.com and click the try it free button, try it now. You can actually get your personal environment and then you can take advantage of it right out of the box. And if you're interested, you can contact us to do a one-on-one session and we can get more in depth with you directly. So thank you again, everyone. Craig, thank you so much for that great demo. That was fantastic. Really appreciate that. And we really appreciate everyone's time and have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.